And actually the topic was suggested by sort of a sidebar conversation on the paddy cord between Prashant Gupta and me, and we were talking about this new book, and then Shantanu was right there. He said, oh, this is one of my areas of speciality, and lo and behold, thanks to him for taking the time to do this. So I'll have Shriki introduce him, and over to you, Shriki.
Thank you, Amit. Good morning, everybody, and it's a privilege to be introducing Shantanu, dear friend of mine. Shantanu comes from Kanpur, very solid lineage of doctors, and the joke I was making was probably if you walk into his house in Kanpur, probably the chair also will write you a prescription. So mom, dad, grandfather, everybody is a doctor. So it was very natural for him to pick up medicine. Genuinely warm, very, very nice person, loves to cook, has green fingers, he can grow things, gardening and stuff like that. Fantastic voice, so at some point of time you need to listen to him sing.
Wow.
And
there's a lullaby at the end of the talk.
Yep.
and I don't have to talk about his dancing skills. For those who have attended those Espana parties, they set the floor on fire, Anisha and Shantanu. Also, what else am I missing out? Good foodie, good buddy to sit and have meals and drinks, and yeah, Shantanu, over to you.
Yes, thanks so much. So, when we think of sleep, talk about sleep, we're thinking happy thoughts, quiet thoughts. Sleep should be calming, should be peaceful, right? Usually wrong. Usually sleep can be chaotic. People can snore, people can not get good quality sleep, may not feel very, very relaxed, may find it anxiety-inducing to get a good night's sleep. Sleep isn't as smooth as one would like it to be most of the times. So before we actually get into the nitty-gritty, just a hypothetical question. It's all right there in front of you. What would you pay for a pill that makes you feel better, be more productive, more creative, less likely to get Alzheimer's and various other dementias, and as a sidebar probably also help you lose a little bit of weight? If there was a pill, I'm sure a lot of people would be happy to buy it. That's exactly what sleep is. The problem is, we don't really pay a lot of attention to sleep. Most of the time it's something I can do with my eyes closed, very literally. It's undervalued. It's one of those things which we don't really think about too much. And if you actually look into literature, if you look into scientific material, you'll find that over the last 50 years, which is like a really short period of time, people have stopped sleeping. In fact, from 8.5 hours, we're sleeping less than 6.5 hours across the population if you look at the statistics. And one of the reasons is that we're not very sure what we're talking about. What exactly is sleep? Why is it important? In fact, till very recently, a lot of doctors, medical science itself, has been a little ambiguous about what's going on. We've been playing catch-up, so to say, about various types of sleep problems. Kind of gone overboard a little bit recently, so we've decided that we need to look really hard about what are the kind of problems which may be associated with sleep. And there are a lot. It's a little confusing. So, I mean, why are we having this talk? Why is it really important to know a little bit about sleep? We're not trying to just look for a topic of conversation off the badminton court or at a party, right? There must be some things that we really need to hold on to, something which will not just help you fall asleep, but help you stay asleep well. So there's just lots and lots of information out there, right? There's lots of books, websites, people who are telling you things. My granddad used to say this, my best friend says that, and they're all right. Everybody thinks that they know the final word on what sleep is, how we should sleep, how many hours we should sleep, etc. And that's the problem. So, I mean, aim here is to basically cut down our understanding into a few basic points, understand what is really important. So, this is essentially what I'll talk about. So I'll talk about a little bit about the basics of sleep, sleep patterns, what are the common problems that we come across, what should we really pay attention to, when should we sit up and say, you know what, I think there might be a problem, what can we do, and then when do we say, you know what, enough is enough, you need to go and visit somebody, take help. So we'll talk about a few myths, certain problems or things that are talked about but we're not really very sure. So first and foremost, does our brain rest when we sleep? Now, this is a long-standing myth. People used to think that this is the most passive thing we can do. Across 8 hours, nearly about 1/3 of your day, our brain rests, which is really, really untrue. In fact, for that 8 hours, or hopefully 8 hours, there is a lot of stuff going on. In fact, there are certain times in our night when we are actually working, our brain is working nearly 30% more than when we are wide awake doing stuff. And part of it is we're resting, we're getting our mood stabilized, we're relaxing, right? Memory consolidation is a really, really big thing. So whenever we're thinking of how to memorize things, if you've not had a good quality sleep, chances are that you're not going to be very good at it. Our whole brain does not relax, neither does it get very, very active, but there's a specific area called the hippocampus, which is a very small part in the corner of our brain, and that goes into overdrive. So it is actively trying to decide what to do with our memories. If I had to give you like an example, if it were, let's say, a small memory, which the first time it hit our brain, went into a small pen drive, dicey software, not a very good operating system, it's there somehow. When we go to sleep, we pick it up and we plug it into our central hard drive and we decide, okay, now it's stable. So the operating software is good, it's going to stay there forever. So that's essentially what is happening when we fall asleep.
And does it process short-term memory or long-term memory?
Short-term memory is what happens when we, so we'll talk about types of memories as well, yes. So, and what else does it do is, obviously, apart from the brain, there's a whole rest of our body, right? So our body does need relaxation. So our muscle building, our tissue regeneration, all of those things, we get recharged. But there's a lot of back-end office work also which keeps on going on. So there are a lot of these things which are happening at the cellular level. So we've got various metabolism which is taking the trash out and getting the system ready for the next day's work. So all that also seems to be happening. And what we found is that when we don't sleep, our body interprets it as a crisis time. They decide that it's like when we don't eat, our body realizes that we're in starvation mode and we start collecting as much as we can, kind of hold on to our fat and our reserves. Similarly, when we are asleep, we're not sleeping, our body also decides that this is probably not good. It's a crisis. And it does a lot of the similar kind of things. It changes our metabolism at a cellular level very, very drastically. So we are not really doing what we should be doing. Coming to what Deepak talked about. So sleep is not a single event. It is not something that you fall asleep at say 11 in the night and wake up at 6 in the morning and you've been pretty much doing the same thing throughout. The various stages of sleep, and each stage, so we have about 5 stages, 4 which are part of something called non-REM sleep and one which is called a REM sleep. Now you may have heard this term before. And all of them have some role to play and each role is a little bit different. First couple of stages, stage 1 and stage 2, is kind of falling asleep, we're relaxed, we're in a happy phase. We actually remember some of the things which are going on because we're in the process of falling asleep. But that doesn't do a lot for us. So we take a 30-minute nap, we don't really hit any of the deeper stages. So although it may make you feel temporarily a little bit better, it's not doing a lot for your general well-being. It's only when you hit stage 3, which is about 30 to 40 minutes into your sleep cycle, that you really start relaxing. Your body starts relaxing, and that's when we call it restorative. So it's a time of your sleep where you really start healing. And it's when you hit stage 4 that your sleep is really, really deep. That's when you really get a lot of injury resolvement, physically and mentally. And all of a sudden, for some weird reason, after that, we suddenly go into stage 5, which is our REM sleep, and things in our brain go haywire. We become hyperactive. Not our bodies. We are able to move. But that's when we start dreaming. That's when we start thinking. That's when our brain starts processing a lot of our memories. So a lot of these things start happening at that point of time. Another thing that I'd like to touch upon, and this is very, very important for kids, but for adults as well, is that growth hormone. Something that we may have all heard about. Growth hormone is responsible for our growth, tissue building, muscle building, bone growth, everything. So nearly 70% of all our growth hormone is secreted during one particular phase of sleep. One particular phase of deep part of our sleep. So if you don't get a good quality sleep, a lot of this gets affected. Not just in kids, but even in adults. Coming to types of memories, I mean that's something that people like to talk about, whether they can remember things. So there are two types of memories. Something called conscious memory. So I decide in class that I've got to remember all the capitals of all the countries in the world. I actively am trying to remember that. So that's conscious memory. I want to remember that. And then there is something called subconscious memory. So for example, how do I tie my laces? How do I use a screwdriver? How do I paint something? So these are things that we kind of grow up learning over the years. We don't think that we need to remember it, but our body has to. So these are two types of memories, and deep sleep is responsible for conscious memories. And very, very deep sleep, or the REM sleep, is what helps us inadvertently or to subconsciously remember various methods, various processes. So now you don't need a lot of technicalities about sleep, but one thing I'd like you to know is that when we start off sleeping, we start with stage 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, and we kind of go back to stage 3, 2, 1, and that's when we hit REM sleep. So it's after one full cycle we hit REM sleep, and then the whole cycle starts again, about 90 to 120 minutes. But another thing is, if you look at this, you've got a 5-minute thing here, you've got 10 minutes, 15 minutes, so on and so forth. So the first 3 to 4 hours of sleep, we don't really hit much of REM sleep. So our brain is still not very, very rested. So until we've hit 3 to 4 hours of sleep, our memories don't get consolidated. Our brain doesn't get very, very well rested. And that's why it's not really good to take short naps or sleep for just 2 to 3 hours. It's really important that we hit that 4 to 6 hour mark to at least get somewhere. It's not ideal, but that's the bare minimum that you would want to look into. Another question?
Yeah, this is.
Yeah?
So why is it that you feel rested when you do like an afternoon nap for an hour? Is it that's just physical rest?
Physical rest.
Okay.
That's primarily physical rest. And if you are already sleep deprived, then any sleep would be good, right? But on a regular basis, that's not the solution. So, I mean, this is something that we hear, we talk about, some people think it, that if you're an older person, is it okay to sleep less? Now, we won't get into the technicalities of who is older and what is older, but yeah, that's actually untrue. We all need sleep. Now, if you look at this graph, I don't know how many of you can see it, but essentially what it says is that, so this is all sleep, and approximately 14 to 18 years of age, that's where the slope actually plateaus. So after 18 years of age, we more or less need the same amount of sleep. Doesn't really matter whether we are 40, 50, 60, 80. We ideally should need the same amount of sleep. Now for some reason we might not get enough sleep as we grow older. But that doesn't mean that we don't need it. We still do need it. Another thing that you'll see is this yellow bit over here. So this yellow bit is the REM sleep. That's the part of sleep where we are all hyperactive. And this is the blue sleep. The blue sleep doesn't change all that much. But you can see that the way we learn our processes, the way we learn how to tie a shoelace, the way we learn how to ride a cycle, that is something which happens to a very large extent when we are growing up. And that's why we need a lot of REM sleep at that time. But it doesn't stop. So we always need REM sleep. So even when we grow older, we always need to stick with those long hours of sleep. Another question somebody asked. Can we cheat? on sleep. Can we say, you know what, let's do 3 parties, we'll catch up with a little bit of work, and after that, probably next Saturday we'll think about sleep. That's not going to work. That is absolutely not going to work. And we're all culprits to that. I mean, especially post this season, we've all done it at some point of time or the other. Most of us have. And that's not workable in the long run. That's not something that you can keep doing. So, it's very confusing, right? There's so many sleep related problems. And the problem is that sleep disorders are actually quite common. They are often very, very serious. So it may not really be something that you realize. But the good thing is it's treatable. They're always treatable. There is a solution. But unfortunately, they're nearly always underdiagnosed. We take a long time to realize, I think this might be a sleep problem. I think that, this is happening because I don't probably get a good quality sleep. Lots of confusing terminologies. You don't really need to know this. I just try to break it down for you. But essentially, sleep problems are very basic. You're either sleeping too little or you're sleeping too much. You're sleeping funny. You're having nightmares. You're sleeping scared, irritating sleep. You're randomly falling asleep. Basically, this is what happens. But I'll talk about 2 things essentially here. One is what we call insomnia or lack of sleep. And 2, problems related to snoring. So basically, problems related to snoring essentially relate to lack of oxygen, lack of air. So these are the 2 groups of problems that we'll kind of talk about. Insomnia is something that most people have heard of. It's something that we talk about every now and then. And essentially, what does cause insomnia? A lot of things, right? So we're not even going to go into what are the social problems, mental problems, physical problems, what medications can cause insomnia. That's a whole medical lecture in itself. But I think what you should know is that there are 2 separate terms, something called sleep deprivation and something called insomnia. These are 2 separate things. Insomnia essentially means you're unable to either fall asleep or unable to stay asleep. So if you're waking up in the middle of the night, or if you're just lying in bed till 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, not able to fall asleep, we call it insomnia. But we call it insomnia only if, number 1, there is an adequate opportunity to fall asleep. So if you're flying across the world, constantly jet lagged, don't have lots of work happening in the house, construction going on, that's not adequate opportunity. And the second thing is, we call it insomnia if your lack of sleep is actually affecting your daytime function. Now it usually does affect. People may think it's not affecting, but that's what we call insomnia. But all people with insomnia will be sleep deprived, but it's not necessarily that all sleep deprived people have insomnia. They might just be having bad habits, bad sleep processes. So they're slightly different. More or less know that. Right. More or less know that watching television or playing on your smartphone will not help you fall asleep at night. So if somebody says, you know what, I'm a little bit sleepy, I'll just sit in front of the TV until I fall asleep. Chances are they're going to fall asleep an hour later than they would have if they had gone to bed.
Reading a book?
We'll come to that as well. So, and it's not just teenagers, it's not just the elderly, it's like pretty much all of us are hooked onto various serials, various movies. People who aren't, they're lucky. But yeah, this is an absolute no. Who else? So basically, there are a whole other set of people, right, who are sleep deprived. Any new parent would probably be able to attest to that, right? And it's something which a lot of times we can't do a lot about, but we can definitely focus on it. The husband or the wife, whoever is dealing with it, for the bulk of the thing. Now, stimulants. Most people know that caffeine is not a great thing. Most people also know that caffeine makes them feel good. What I do know is that caffeine, and when I say caffeine, I don't mean just coffee. I mean coffee, tea, Red Bull, Coke, Pepsi, everything which has a high caffeine content. Caffeine actually has a half-life of about 6 hours. So if you've had a big grande at 6 p.m., chances are it's going to be functioning till at least 12. So a lot of people may find it difficult to sleep because of things like that. Coming to books. Yeah. We all every now and then get hooked onto the latest book and think, yeah, just one more chapter, right? I mean, what will that do? Do it more regularly and you'll know what that does. It does affect our sleep cycles and it's probably not something that we want to do. Unfortunately, some of us, they're just unlucky. We have this hyperactive mind of a 5-year-old, constantly thinking, constantly asking questions, not always the easiest thing to deal with. But these are all things which would give rise to sleep deprivation in some form or the other. So that's something that can cause this. So it does cause. What does it really affect us? I mean, is there any real world scenario where lack of sleep is doing us harm? Lots. Now I'm sorry that it's a very busy slide and I'll kind of break it down for you, but starting from things like just bad memory, impaired cognitive abilities. So that's something which is well known. People know that they don't function very well if they are not sleeping. We know that things, lack of sleep can cause anxiety. What we may not know is that it causes frank depression. There is a very, very high incidence of depression, suicidal tendencies amongst people who are insomniacs. Coming to more complicated stuff, so stroke, heart attacks, you'll realize all of this is way, way more common in people who are not adequately sleeping or adequately either number of hours or quality of sleep. Both can give rise to this. You might want to ask, how can lack of sleep cause cancer? I mean, this is just some random study somewhere, right? We have a lot of information that sleep, when we sleep, one of the things that happen at that microcellular level, remember we talked about that, is that there is something called an NK killer cell. You don't need to know more about it. But essentially its job is to break down precursors to cancer cells. So every time that there is some complicated dysfunctional cell which could turn into a cancer cell, these things which are part of our immune system, they just break it down. And when you don't sleep enough, we don't break down enough of these. We don't have enough NK cancer cells, and prostatic cancer, breast cancer, probably a few more. So this is what we do know. Diabetes, very, very common. It causes insulin resistance and it's something that we probably don't want to deal with, right? It does cause weight gain. Now I won't get into the technicalities of that, but we talked about how crisis mode when we don't sleep, starvation, holding on to whatever we can. So basically it's our body's interpretation of how to hold on to something which will keep us alive. So that's how we tend to store all of this. So Amit talked about this a little while ago, and this is a relatively new book. It's something which I believe is very good. I haven't read it myself, and it talks about various aspects of sleep. And what I do know is I've heard Matthew Walker online, and he's very interesting. He talks about various aspects of sleep. So we know that sleep has been a problem. People have been writing about it for a long time now. In fact, nowadays people have actually started making money off it. I mean, this is actually a game show on Netflix, which actually, what it does is it grabs a group of people and tells them to stay awake for the next 24-36 hours, and then tells them to do simple jobs. And it is not just funny, but it is scary to realize that just with a day of not sleeping well, we are not able to do things which we normally would be able to do. And that's because there is a distinct functional impairment. The minute our body or our mind decides that we are unable to sleep enough, we have not been rested enough, we start getting these micro sleep bouts. So it's like if you are starved, your body cannot be forced to go and eat. But if your brain does not get enough sleep, it can just force you at any point of time to start getting these bouts of micro sleep. And if it happens at an inconvenient time, you might be driving on the road and you suddenly zone out. You suddenly go into the wrong lane. There's lots and lots of statistics to say that the incidence of road traffic accidents goes up many-fold in people who are sleep deprived. Or sometimes we've been reading a book, we desperately want to get to the next page and we realize, I read this already. You keep on rereading the same line. So it's your body which is basically causing your mind, or rather your mind which is causing your body to fall asleep. In fact, data says that if you're sleep deprived, you're pretty much close to a drunkard. Our reaction times are very similar to that of a 0.08 alcohol level, which is really high. You put in jail, or at least have to bribe somebody. So, sleep deprivation does have social implications. It has economic implications. There's a whole lot of time, money, which we lose over the years across the population because we're not getting enough sleep. And essentially, it's a good idea to know whether we have. So, for people who actually got the small questionnaire, they can actually hold on to it and kind of introspect. People who haven't, we'll share it again. It's small PDF, or you can just look it up online. But apart from introspection, it's a good idea to actually spend some time. Just talk to your partner, talk to your wife or husband or whoever. And if you, for any reason, do meet somebody, a medical physician of any kind, it's always a good idea to go and meet with your partner, because chances are that they'll know a little bit more about your sleep patterns than you do. Probably be sleep, right? What do we do about it? There are a whole bunch of traditional methods, things which have been passed across over the generations. Some of them work, some of them don't work, some of them don't work all the time. It's not always easy. But the bottom line is, if you really find yourself an insomniac, find yourself sleep deprived, don't say, oh, you know what, let's do something important while I'm trying to sleep. So one of the take homes is always do something boring that usually will do the job. Sleeping pills. Somebody talked about whether it's okay to take sleeping pills. Now, sometimes it's okay. But those are the times when a doctor has looked into all other factors and decided. But fact of the matter, sleeping pills are not sleeping pills, they are sedating pills. And there's a difference. In sleep, you go through these specific cycles, different parts of your body gets a certain amount of rest. Whereas when you are sedated, there is just a higher center of yours which actually just gets knocked out. It's like giving you general anesthesia. Okay. And you'll get a little bit of physical rest, but it can be dangerous.
What about Bellandur?
We'll come to that. Right. So, I mean, there are more than a few incidences where people have OD'd on sleeping pills inadvertently. And in fact, there's also association with cancer over the years. So we have found that sleeping pills may not always be the safest thing. Now, I'm not saying it cannot be used, but I'm sure there are better solutions. So that's something that one should look into. Now, yeah, so this is the next part of our feature presentation. Okay, so it's how do we save our marriage?
Discriminatory.
Yeah, I know. I should have to fix. I should have to fix.
See, I'm saying.
Yeah, so we will talk about snoring, and fact of the matter is, most of us would either have a room partner or a partner or a colleague who's snoring, or who's told you that you are snoring. And I think there is a lot to talk about, but I'm pretty sure that there is no type of snoring which somebody would classify as good. There is no such thing. But it can sometimes be dangerous. Now, it's not always so, but it's a good idea to really introspect and know whether snoring is something serious, and it obviously depends upon how tolerant your partner is. But there are other ways of being dangerous as well. So one of the myths that we have is snoring is a common problem, but it's not really harmful, right? It is. And not just mentally, but physically harmful. So somebody talked about sleep apnea. Just quick show of hands, how many of you have heard the term sleep apnea? Brilliant. So it makes my life a little easier. So sleep apnea. Preeti is very keen. Yes, it is. some of these things are, some of these things may not be, and you look for a via media solution. But couple of things, numbers don't lie. So I mean, these are relatively old statistics. 7 to 8 crores. That's a little less than 10% of our, maybe about say 8% of our whole population of India has sleep apnea. That's a big number. Okay. And one thing that we've noticed due to lifestyle and various other things, it's largely an urban problem. So we see a lot more of it in the urban population compared to. So how do we know? So whenever we have any medical problem, the first thing is a diagnosis. Snoring, yeah. I mean, all you need is a partner in the room, right? And we know that there is snoring going on. But to know about sleep apnea, that is the real challenge. So how can we pick up on it? How can we realize early on that we might have or somebody might be having? So these are some of the things that we'll notice. So one of the things that you'll notice is, and this is something that I ask very frequently to patients who walk in and say that, Doctor, I snore, is that you feel tired. You have what we call daytime somnolence. You feel very unrefreshed when you wake up in the morning. So when you wake up in the morning, if you feel, you know what, I'm good to go, chances are that you've had a good quality sleep. Do you ever feel tired when you're driving back at a red light in horrible traffic of Bangalore? Maybe I could just doze off a little bit. So these are some of the things which should kind of alert you to the fact that this is not normal. This is something that you should pay attention to. People may feel tired, headaches all the time, not able to focus at work. All of these are risk factors. And then when these things happen over a period of time, we actually might have a personality change. We're always more stressed out, always more anxious, depressed, forgetful. So we kind of feel that it's just forgetfulness, but if it keeps happening, you might want to look into why it's happening. And sometimes the partner may be quite helpful, because the partner might realize that, oh, this guy is just tossing and turning all the time, doesn't seem to be very relaxed while asleep. Sometimes we actually might see the pattern. Now, to understand snoring is very simple, right? That's what's going on, right? But sometimes you might feel that one is happening and all of a sudden there's a stop. There's no sound at all. 10 seconds, 15 seconds, then all of a sudden one, okay, there will be a pattern. You might notice it. Some people might realize it, some people may not. Now that really loud snore, no big deal. I mean, I've heard bad snores, right? But the lull, the period of quietness, that's the scary bit, because that suggests that all of a sudden that guy suddenly stopped snoring and stopped breathing. So that could be a sign that he's kind of choking, or she's kind of choking. And yeah, one of the things is that for snorers, I mean, if you've ever felt first thing in the morning you wake up and you feel your mouth is really dry, that could be a sign, because generally people who snore, they tend to keep their mouth open. So if they're constantly getting airflow through their mouth will really get dry. So these are some of the things which tend to happen. Children, different age groups. So that's a bit tricky, and I'm not going to get into the specifics of this, the very deep details, but what you've got to understand is children do have sleep apnea. I'm sure people with kids have realized that children can snore. They do sometimes, especially when they have a cold or things like that. But they can also have sleep apnea. Unfortunately, they don't present the same way as adults. So adults will come and say, okay, I'm really tired all the time, I'm snoring, my wife is really angry. But kids, they don't know how to do that. So what they will do, they're sleeping alone in their room, so people don't pay attention to the snoring. But they kind of act out. So they'll start getting very rambunctious, they're very, very active, hyperactive, so to say. There's a lot of bedwetting, even though they're a little older in age. All of these things can happen. They're not doing very well at school, they're fighting, things like that. So they're just acting out. And sometimes this can actually be because they're not getting good quality sleep. So that's something that one can keep in mind.
One question, can teeth grinding be controlled?
So teeth grinding, which is technically called bruxism, is a slightly different thing. So it's not usually because of a bad airway. I think that's sort of different. So, see, this is a very, very important line. Obesity, diabetes, hypertension, depression, they have a very, very strong association with our quality of sleep. And why do they have that? To break it down, to dumb it down a little bit, snoring means less space. Less space means less oxygen. Less oxygen means brain realizing it and telling your heart to kind of overact. So it tells our heart to, pump faster, pump more forcefully. Once in a while, it'll work. But if this keeps on happening over a period of time, our heart is constantly under pressure. And these are the people who will start developing high blood pressure, heart attacks, all of a sudden. So this is something which not just irritating or a social disruptor, it's actually can be fatal. Kind of repetitive. We saw a few of these things with insomnia, we're seeing a few of these things in sleep apnea and snoring. But the fact of the matter is, whether you sleep less or you sleep less effectively, the effect will be the same. You'll have more or less the same kind of problems. So insomniacs and snorers with sleep apnea all will have a similar group of problems. That's something which one should keep in mind. Coming to what do we do about it? So when do we sit up and say, you know what, I think we need to get a little bit of help? And what is it that we should really be looking at? So this is something available online everywhere. It's called the Epworth Sleepiness Scale. It just assesses what we are doing and how we feel while we're doing it. It's very simple. Anybody can Google it. You got a high score, that's not good. You got a low score, that means you're fine. Okay, so that's something that you can do. But whenever somebody comes to me and says, Doc, I snore, I also want to know what exactly is going on. So what could be the cause? And there are lots and lots of causes. Snoring is not a one single problem. Essentially, any blockage, either it's in the nose or behind the nose, tonsils are big, your nose is bent, any one or more of these could give rise to that. So usually a quick 5-minute camera exam tells us about that. Okay, but these are high-risk people. People who have a chin which is in. Why is that? Because if the chin is in, the tongue is back. If the tongue is back, is a higher chance that it may fall back and block. If you've got a lot of fat which is deposited over here, so people have different types of obesity. So you've got a really thick neck, chances are it's going to block. Large tonsils, deviated nasal septum, bulky tongue. So we won't get into the technicalities of that as well. But to really understand whether you have a scary type of snoring, not just by loudness. This is not about sound, but are you getting enough oxygen? Normally we do a simple test called a sleep study. Anyone heard of a sleep study? Yes. Brilliant. Okay. So sleep study is not complicated. All you need to do in a sleep study is go to sleep. But before you go to sleep, what usually is done, whether you're in the hospital or at home, is that we just connect a bunch of monitors which monitor your heart rate, your oxygen levels, your pattern of sleeping, etc. And it just kind of monitor in real time through one whole night what's going on. Did you have an apnea? If you had an apnea, what happened to your heart rate at that point of time? Did your BP shoot up, etc. And that kind of gives us a risk stratification about what exactly seems to be going on. Solutions, right? We obviously need solutions, and not everything you read on the internet is something that you need to follow. Few people will ask it, I'm sure, if I hadn't put the slide up. But you know what? Why can't I just get a pill? Right? And fact of the matter is, people who snore or people who are insomniacs, a pill doesn't cut it. One place where giving a pill might solve a problem is if you have allergies which is causing your nasal passageway or your airway to kind of close down a little bit. Treating the snoring that due to treating the allergy is, yeah, that works. But most of the times it's a lot more hard work. Most of the times it's things that we don't necessarily want to do. Don't want to cut down on junk food, don't want to cut down on smoking, drinking, etc. But fact of the matter is, this is essentially what one should be doing. So if you're taking a lot of carbs, if you're taking a lot of junk food, chances are that you're going to grow fat. Chances are that you're going to get a lot of fat deposits around the airway, and chances are that you will get snoring. Smoking, what does it do? So smoking, apart from a million other things including cancer, one of the things it does, it causes your nasal as well as lower airway to kind of swell up. So if you've got less space, you're obviously going to snore. You're obviously going to have less oxygen which is passing through. Alcohol. Somebody had asked this. I mean, is it okay for me to just take a couple of drinks before I go to bed? I think I sleep better. Alcohol is a muscle relaxant. Okay. Now, one of the things which happens to block our nose or our throat is if there is something blocking the passageway. But there's something called a dynamic collapse. For example, we're not snoring while we're awake, right? So whenever we fall asleep, there must be something which changes. So that something is our muscle tone. Our airway at certain areas is made of muscle. And our muscles are usually awake, they're active, they're very taut during the daytime. The minute we fall asleep, our muscles relax and they collapse. They collapse for everyone. But if you've got less space already, then that collapse can drastically give rise to snoring. And if you take alcohol, we see it consistently. In fact, whenever we're doing a sleep study, we tell them, please don't take alcohol on the day that you're doing a sleep study because it will give us improper information. So unless you're like a 3-peg a day every day, you should not take alcohol on the day that you do a sleep study. But I think the largest association that we find is that obesity. Obesity, what we found is people who are obese, the minute they lose, say, 10 kilos, 15 kilos, due to whatever methods, the snoring comes down, the risk for sleep apnea comes down. So that's something that one should keep in mind. Do these work? There are a bunch of anti-snoring devices available online. You Google one, you'll start getting ads about all the others which are available. Just humor me once. If everybody can just take both their fingers, 2 fingers, just keep it over their cheeks like this. Just breathe once through their nose, normal breathing, okay, in and out, and then just pull your fingers up and out like this, and breathe in and out again. You feel any difference? No. Okay. So the people who do feel a difference, that's because there may be a block in an area called the nasal valve. That's a small area in the nose, which is supposed to be the narrow space. These nasal strips would help those people. And that's it. No one else. So there is a very, very small specific role for using this. This is not a one cure fits all. It's not that way. So it's not like anybody who snores starts using this and is going to stop snoring. So there are very specific uses. For example, these help if you've got a tongue fall. So this kind of prevents the tongue from falling backwards. So it might help if you have tongue fall. Otherwise, probably not. Anybody know what this is? CPAP, 1 or 2? Yeah, okay. So, see, basically, snoring, less space. We want more air to pass through. So, it either passes through by increasing the space or by pushing air at a higher pressure. So, a CPAP stands for Continuous Positive Airway Pressure Machine. All it does is it pushes air at a higher pressure, and it works brilliantly. It is very safe. It is an absolute solution to patients who have sleep apnea. It's just not always very attractive. It's not something which works well. It's not something which everyone likes to use or prefers to use. And apart from that, there are a few other problems. So it can cause a little bit of dryness. It can cause, it's maybe uncomfortable, the types of masks you're using. So there are a bunch of things which it can cause. So it's not something that everybody wants to or can use for that matter. But there are limited number of plan Bs available, right? So the other option is surgery of some kind. Now this is not what most of us look like when they're on OT. This is not my photograph on OT. Okay, but
Just a scare.
fact of the matter is there are a few simpler surgeries which are there and which are excellent. For example, if you have a deviated nasal septum and that is the root cause of your problem, just get it fixed. It's a 20-30 minute surgery, works wonders. Or if you have large tonsils and they are blocking, just get them removed. It's not something that we don't do, we do it in even a 12-year-old or 12-year-old. So definitely a 50-year-old with sleep apnea should benefit from it, and it's not dangerous. But there are some newer treatments. Now, like everything, people are becoming minimally invasive. They're using newer technologies, newer lasers and various radio frequency sources. And this actually looks like a dental procedure, right? Yeah, it's not. This is a 15-minute procedure that we do in the outpatient department, where we use something called a radio frequency probe, and all we do is we tighten the palate, which is the roof of your mouth, and that prevents it from kind of collapsing inwards. It doesn't work for everyone, but chosen rightly, it's basically what we call like a facelift for the roof of your mouth. It just tightens it, brings it up, and it just works well. There are various other things that work for our nose, work for various other parts of our airway. So there are certain things that can be done minimally invasive, not effective. Yeah, so that's the big question, right? Any brave people, anybody in the show of hands, anybody who snores? Okay, so yeah, a lot of finger pointing. 4 hours of sleep. I'm fine with that. Gandhiji used to sleep just 3 hours, Nehruji used to sleep just 4 hours. They're big CEOs and celebrities who function absolutely perfectly, right? With all due respect, there are people who say that sleep is just a form of rest, right? Our body needs rest, not sleep, quote unquote. I sleep only 2 hours. Not true. To quote another person, the percentage of people who can have a long, healthy, productive life after sleeping for less than 7 hours on a regular basis without showing any signs of impairment rounded off to the closest whole number is 0. Cannot. You might be able to do it once in a while, but you cannot keep sustaining this on a regular basis. Okay.
How do I take your appointment?
Yeah, I mean,
Get in line.
yeah. So this is just to kind of highlight it. I mean, I don't know how many of you remember this headline a while ago.
Yes. In fact, 2 CEOs of SMD back to back collapsed.
Correct.
And at the age of 40, 44.
Right. And what you got to realize is that they were fit.
Yeah.
This gentleman was a runner, and his only thought process was that he can get away without sleeping adequately. Make the most of your days, so to say, right? So yeah, so sleeping is really an important commodity. I don't think you should give up on it.
After this, nobody wanted to take up the job at SMD.
Yeah, so coming towards the last few slides now, sleep hygiene. So essentially what we want is something that we can do ourselves, right? Something that we can say, you know what, I can see there is a problem, why don't I just modify it a little bit? So these are the things that we would focus on, right? How do we sleep? Our sleep schedule, our diet, exercise, habits, things that we can do. What is our local sleep environment? How much do we sleep? If you can't sleep, what should you do? And are there any specific sleep positions which could help us? I think if there's one take-home message, it is sleep schedule. What we've seen is people who are regular to bed and regular to rise, they have a fixed pattern or way of sleeping. Those are people who rarely have sleep-associated problems. So if you're very irregular, one day you're sleeping at 10, one day you're sleeping at 2, one day you're just not sleeping at all, those are the people who find it difficult to fall into a routine and they just feel that they have a very chaotic kind of a sleep. So it's always important to stick to a sleep schedule. Simple things, they're not very, very complicated. Don't nap. Okay, a half an hour nap once in a while on a Sunday afternoon, everybody granted. But on a regular basis, if you're trying to use a quick nap in the afternoon so that you can sleep late in the night, so that you can catch up on work or so that you can catch up on the latest sitcom on Netflix, definitely not advisable. Heavy meals, yeah. You're going to have dinner. Try to not have dinner which is very heavy just before you fall asleep. I mean, for many reasons, not just sleep reasons, you want to have a 2 to 3 hour gap between the time that you eat and the time that you lie down. Caffeine, yeah, we talked about this. In any form, tea, coffee, Coke, Pepsi, whatever you're doing to get your daily fix of caffeine, in the second half of the day, probably don't. And avoid screen. So these are simple things that one can do.
So some say that there are some sleep inducers like warm milk or...
Yeah, yeah. So we'll talk about that as well. So, but yeah, talking about the role of the bedroom. Yeah, we keep it very simple. Just sleep. Essentially what we're going to talk about is that trying to segregate sleep from work. That's the challenge. Or sleep from having your flat screen in front of you while you're trying to sleep. So basically what we found over the years is that people who tend to just focus on using your bedroom for limited amount of work, but preferably just, so they switch the TV on in the living room and they come to the bedroom to sleep. Those are the people who tend to fall asleep a lot better. Make sure that there's not a lot of light. So people do this all the time when they're in Western countries which have long winters. Okay, so Scandinavian countries, they have deep, thick curtains. So just make sure that you don't have a lot of light coming in. It will allow you to fall asleep a lot easier. Okay, and when you lie in bed, I mean, don't say, okay, I'm going to lie in bed and I'll finish off the rest of my thinking or the rest of my work. You're lying in bed thinking about tomorrow's meeting, thinking about whatever paperwork they have left. Not a good idea. Finish all that off, get it out of your system and then come to bed. What about if you can't sleep? Right? We all have times when we are not able to sleep. Like somebody initially mentioned, don't obsess about it. So, oh my God, I can't sleep. It's going to get rid of your sleep anyhow. But try not to worry. Yes, like Preeti mentioned, there are certain things that you can do to make yourself relaxed. Having a small warm drink, hot cocoa, hot bath, soft music. All these sound very frivolous, but they actually do work. So if you find yourself in a scenario where you're unable to fall asleep easily, try all these things. They do help. Not everything will work for everyone, but it helps you distract yourself from the whole ordeal of trying to fall asleep as well. But whenever you're not falling asleep, don't say, you know what, I'm not falling asleep, I might as well go and clean up the kitchen, I might as well do a little bit of dishes, might as well do some laundry. Please don't. Aim is to try to do stuff which is really, really boring and your mind really switches off and you say, you know what, might as well fall asleep. Right? Okay. When I say take a light snack, it doesn't mean wake up at 11:30, go take out a tub of ice cream and start eating like crazy. But sometimes just if you're feeling a little bit peckish, a small snack might help you fall asleep. So these are small things which insomniacs or people who are unable to fall asleep could do that. And finally, I think sleep position. So rule of thumb, one shoe does not fit all here. Different people have different ways of sleeping, different body structures, different type of beds, different ways in which they got used to sleeping. And there are different sleep positions, and what you realize is good sleep on the back, okay, is great for certain things, but it is really bad for snoring, because the minute you fall asleep on the back, everything, all the soft tissues, they tend to fall down with gravity and your space becomes automatically a lot less. Okay, sleeping on your stomach, people always say it's not good for you, but it is brilliant for people who snore, because again your airway opens up. But I think one of the best intermediate ways is just to sleep on your side. It actually reduces sleep apnea and reduces your snoring. It doesn't cause any spinal compression, so people who have back problems, it's great for them. Okay, and it also allows you to be in a position that opens up your lungs. It allows them to expand a little bit better. So I think if there's one position that you wanted to choose, then that's probably it.
But sometimes people say you sleep on the left side or right side.
Yeah, so there is no such thing.
No such thing.
Left lateral, right lateral, both are absolutely fine.
So there's no science in that.
Correct. Okay. Right. So I think the last couple of slides, we're more or less done here. But this is a book which I don't know how many of you have read, but it's a very easy read. It's very simple, and it's obviously based on Japanese inputs here. Now, what you've got to realize is a lot of the Japanese are probably some of the oldest, and they have the highest life expectancy that one people have, and they usually focus on simple things in life. One of them obviously is sleep. Now somebody mentioned melatonin. What you've got to realize is melatonin is one hormone which actually is secreted every night. During the daytime we don't really get melatonin secretion. And melatonin is something which it just standardizes our wake sleep rhythms. It does a lot of things for us. It's something which goes a little haywire when we're jet lagged, and I'm not going to get into that. But what we do know is that a lot of research, like hundreds of millions of dollars of research, is going into the role of melatonin in slowing down our aging process. It's something that actually allows us to live longer and better. So, and the only way we're getting melatonin is if we sleep adequately. So chances are that it might be a good idea for us to sleep adequately.
But okay to take melatonin in the jet lag.
Yeah, so again, it is used, it's not freely available everywhere, but it is something which does work in very severe jet lag, yes. I got to agree. So, just the last slide. Just a few take-home messages. I hope some of this would help you. But I think one of the things that people, they don't like to talk about this. I sleep a lot. Nobody says, hey, you know what, I sleep a lot. It's not something to be embarrassed by. Okay? You should focus on your 7 to 9 hours of sleep, and napping is definitely not a solution. Change your habits if that helps. Could be food, could be diet, could be exercise, whatever. It is helpful. Snoring is not just a social problem. Snoring is most definitely much more than that, so you should not ignore it. Sleep apnea patients, they are 3 times more likely to die prematurely than people who don't snore and don't have sleep apnea. So it's not just something which incidentally can happen to a few people around the corner. Take help. Okay, push your spouses to get help if you feel that they do snore, if you feel that they are insomniacs, because it has long-term implications. It could actually save their lives. Okay. Diet and routine, yeah, it's a given. We need to focus on that. But I think one of the take-homes, which is very, very important, is stick to a routine. It's routine, routine, routine. That's really what would help us. Thanks.
One question.
Yep.
Is there any specific timing for optimum sleep? Like some people say that we should get up by 5 o'clock and sleep by 10 o'clock. Supposing the people working in BPO every day and they do night shift and they sleep during daytime, is that okay?
So it's not ideal. It's not helpful. It's a lot easier for us to sleep in the night time and wake up in the day. Now melatonin is something which gets secreted. A lot of times people have found that people who are sleeping during the day and they don't get exposed to the sunlight don't get enough melatonin. So it's not ideal that we sleep during the daytime and stay awake during the night. A few hours here and there, and the body does kind of acclimatize to a certain extent, but over a long period of time it's definitely not helpful.
How do you self-diagnose insomnia?
People who are insomniacs, they generally know. In the sense, I'll clarify. So, I mean, I have friends and people I know who are insomniacs, and they know that they want to fall asleep. They know that they're tired, but when they get into bed, so that was one of my earlier slides, that given appropriate opportunity, if you still find that you're just sleeping 3 hours a night, 4 hours a night, and you feel the need to sleep, but you're just not able to, those are the people who we categorize as insomniacs. So usually, that is one scenario where patients themselves will realize that they want to sleep, but they're just not able to.
So is there any self-help for it, or is it only the medicine which can
So,
help you?
so that's again a long process. I mean, insomniacs are insomniacs because of various reasons. Could be hormonal, could be some physical problem, could be just a habitual thing. All the things which will help sleep deprivation will help insomniacs to a certain extent. But those are the only people wherein initially you may require some medical treatment. Usually insomniacs meet psychiatrists. They work with sleep patterns also quite a bit. So that's how one would generally start off. But even before that, sitting and talking about it, trying to understand whether you're an insomniac throughout the year or just like once a week, once in a while, that kind of.
Is there a recommended time? Is there a recommended time of day for exercise? Because I've heard that if you exercise in the evenings, you get a little buzz and it keeps you
Yeah,
awake.
so that's also kind of a myth. In that exercise any time through the day is helpful. It's pretty anecdotal that some people say that if you exercise very aggressively just before you fall asleep, you might not sleep well. Mostly that's not true. You might.
I would try to sleep.
No, but it's a fact, even if, at least in my personal case, I work out in the evenings, I'm somehow hyperactive till late in the night. So
Yeah, so
linked to
it's not the norm. I'm not very sure about that, but what I do know is it's not the norm. So it's not, I mean, if you exercise at 10 and you're trying to go to sleep by 10:30, 10:45, yeah, the chances are that you're not going to fall asleep. But if you exercise at 8 and you try to sleep at 10, 10:30, most probably you will.
So you mentioned,
Sorry.
You mentioned CPAP as a solution for sleep apnea. Is it temporary? Do you have to take it every night of your life, or is it just?
Yeah. So CPAP machine is basically just pushing in air.
Right.
It's not changing your anatomy. It's your anatomy which is defective due to some reason, which is causing it to close down. So either we structurally change the anatomy by doing some kind of surgical intervention, or we use a CPAP machine. A CPAP machine is not something you use for a week or a month or a year and stop. It's something that you essentially will have to use lifelong.
If a child is constantly changing positions in the night and making some sort of sound, maybe while sleeping, does that mean that she's
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Yeah.
So awesome presentation. I think you had anticipated many of our things and you said it's coming and it came. Fantastic. I could give you a standing ovation.
I'm just going to take a couple of minutes to acknowledge Doc and just round up with a few summary points of people. So Doc, outstanding talk. Thank you. I think what he beautifully covered was some of the myths, some of the impacts. A lot of people are not conscious of the impacts. And when you start looking at impacts is when you really get aware of what is the risk that we are carrying. You know, one thing great that doctors, lawyers and accountants do is to raise awareness. And a lot of time the awareness comes through fear. But remember that the biggest breakdowns lead to the biggest breakthroughs. And I think a starting point journey for all of us is wherever we have a breakdown on sleep, see how we can convert that to a breakthrough. And that's where magic will start happening. So Doctor, beautifully done.
Thanks for questioning.
I think the best way to recognize this talk is to remember कि अभी तक ना यहाँ पे लैंप पोस्ट था और हम यहाँ solution ढूंढ रहे थे कि लैंप पोस्ट यहाँ पे. But I think what doctor really said कि sleep deprivation is only a symptom. Problem कहीं और है. So I think the big shift for me was there's a blind spot thinking that yes, sleep is a problem. Problem is not sleep. Sleep is a symptom, the problem is somewhere else. So if all of us can take one takeaway, saying कि मेरी लाइफ में मैं कहाँ पे ढूंढ रहा था solution और solution कहाँ पे है, that'll be helpful. So maybe show of hands, one takeaway. I think that'll be a real respect to the doctor saying that we've taken something away. So one person just raise the hand. What's the one action that you're committed to causing in your life to make a difference to your sleep? So just one action from everybody. Anybody just raise your hand. And
if my husband gets it.
I think you'll have company.
I
I'll tell Amit that I'll come 10 minutes late to tennis because I want to sleep for 10 minutes.
You already do.
Who else wants to share? Keep sharing. The routine factor is the key.
I think routine is the
key.
sleep on time, get up on time. I think that's very, very important.
Party stops at 11 p.m. in Espana.
For me, I come into a no gadget time 1 hour before sleep for everybody in the family.
Yeah.
All right.
What else? Anybody else? Just keep sharing. Please keep sharing one action.
Don't drink coffee after 6 p.m.
Yeah, absolutely.
No post-prandial whiskey to relax.
Maybe,
So, in talks at Espana, we are committed to make a difference to the community. So far, just to let you know that the talks are being completely run by a volunteer group, and you kind of manage whatever finance we need to manage for snacking out there. Anybody who wants to voluntarily give any amount can message to me or Amit Somani. Any amount that you want to voluntarily contribute if you think this talk makes a difference, because it takes a little while to keep it sustainable and running. So thank you, and we appreciate your coming over here, your sponsorship, and making a difference.
Thanks.
So live a healthy life.
All right.
The snacks are out there.